Voices reporter Amy Colton is here to clear up some of the confusion about this formidable and inspiring man.
I think he would say he wasn't ahead of his time, he was in his time. The thing about Brown v. Board is it follows on a very long history of strategizing really to desegregate the school system. When he was chief counsel for the NAACP, he started by trying to desegregate graduate schools, and so he successfully worked to desegregate some graduate schools. And from there, then they moved to trying to desegregate the grammar schools, and of course were successful in legally requiring the desegregation, overthrowing Plessy v. Ferguson, right? The whole separate but equal, which had been inscribed into the law for 100 years. Oftentimes when we think about Johnson, we think about the Vietnam War. And so he has this image of being a warmonger, and we don't realize a lot of the social change that came about in the 60s came because Johnson was also pushing for it. He had worked as a school teacher in segregated schools in Texas when he was a young man. And so school segregation was actually a real big issue for Johnson. And he knew the work that Marshall had done in desegregation, and greatly, I mean, everybody knew it, but he greatly respected. Marshall was a bit of a hero for him. And he also was familiar with his legal background. I mean, when he was working for the NAACP, he argued 40-something cases before the Supreme Court. I mean, that's a huge number for anybody to be arguing before the Supreme Court. He won 39 of those cases, right? When he was serving on the Second Circuit, which was one of these lesser appointments that I think Kennedy had appointed him to, not one of his decisions was overturned by the Supreme Court. So Johnson knew that if you want to successfully appoint, in the 60s and all this turmoil, a successful candidate to be the first black justice of the Supreme Court, it has to be a brilliant legal scholar. In the 80s, it seemed that politics was swaying more. When he said reason, part of what he was talking about is having a larger understanding of the broader historical context in which decisions are made. This is one of the things that makes Marshall incredible, I would say, in relation to even anybody we have on the Supreme Court right now. Sometimes people say, oh, you know, Ginsburg, she's such an advocate, and so on and so. She's good for women's rights, but she doesn't really make the intersections or the connections with other people's issues sometimes. Marshall did, and so we're talking a Supreme Court justice in the middle of the 20th century making connections that many of our justices aren't making in the 21st century. Johnson appointed him because he knew he had such a track record, such a success. He was so good at what he did, you know? And so it's not just in law, it's where your passion is. We need young people to go where their passion is so they can do excellent work there and make a difference.